to Flying Upstream, Free Spirits. Today's conversation is for anyone who has ever told themselves, I'm fine. Not happy, not fulfilled, not lit up, just fine. And maybe you've stayed there longer than you want to admit because fine is comfortable, fine doesn't rock the boat, fine keeps everyone else happy. But what if fine is actually the thing holding you back from the life you're meant to live? Today, I'm joined by Susan Hall. Susan helps busy people learn the skills to not just get through life, but actually thrive in it. But her work didn't come from theory, it came from a year that completely shattered her world. In 2016, she was diagnosed with a rare bone cancer. At the same time, her husband was in the hospital for a heart procedure. She shattered her shoulder, her dog was hit by a car, and her father became paralyzed. Everything changed. And what came out of that wasn't just survival, it was a complete shift in how she saw her life, her choices, and what she was waiting for. Susan, welcome to Flying Upstream.
Right, Kristen, such a pleasure to be here today. And boy, just hearing you talk through that, I call it the year that shall not be named. I can just feel the weight again on my shoulders. And for all of your listeners and viewers who have ever been through a time like that, where you've just had so many heavy things happening at once, it's it's an opportunity, right, to make a choice. Like, how are we going to use this? Are you going to use your adversity like an anchor around your neck to drag you down and make you bitter and play victim? Or can you learn from it and use it as rocket fuel to make a difference for others? So I'm really grateful. I wouldn't wish that time on anybody, but I'm really grateful for the path that has put me on.
Absolutely. And I want to start here because you mentioned something that really stuck with me. You spent a lot of your life being the good girl, and I'm putting that
Yeah.
in air quotes. What did that actually look like for your life day to day?
Yeah, so I was a middle child with brothers and grew up in a really great family. My dad was a teacher, public school teacher, so we didn't have a lot of money, but there was a lot of love in our family, and we were encouraged to take care of each other and the people around us and nature. And I, for the longest time, thought that if you did, one, two, three, you would get this result. So if you worked hard in school, you would get these kinds of grades. If you treated, people a certain way and always showed your best side, you would make friends. And I was a peacemaker, I think, being a middle child too, but I spent a lot of my life good. It was a good life, not just fine, beyond fine. But I sometimes stifled my voice and I pushed my feelings down and I did whatever it took to make my parents proud of me and my friends want to hang out with me in school. And that served me well to a point, but I realized as I grew up that that leads to a life that's fine, right? That leads to a
Right.
life that's not terrible, that's not awful, but it's not outstanding either. It's not extraordinary. And to really step into our more extraordinary selves, we have to put ourselves out there and we have to be willing to share our thoughts, share our experience, share our light. And that means ruffling some feathers sometimes. And so that was a really powerful lesson for me.
Yeah.
I still, you know, really value being kind. In fact, that's one of the tenets that I talk about, um, but not at the expense of my own voice anymore. That's the difference.
When you look back now, where do you see yourself holding back your voice the most?
Oh, growing up, I think it was probably when I had an opinion that wasn't the most accepted opinion, if you will. If I had a thought or an idea, I would just kind of go with the flow. because it was easier, right? You're not ruffling the you're not ruffling the waters, so to speak.
Hmm.
And and then I would get back, to my little orange and yellow bedroom that I grew up in and think, gosh, why didn't I say something? And I think that's important too, because even at a young age, when we don't step and when we're not as authentic with ourselves or with others, we might not let other people down, but I think that whittles away at our own sense of confidence and chips away at our own sense of self-esteem. So, so now it's still kind, still thoughtful, still always respectful of others. And I feel like, we get to a certain point in life where we've all earned the right to share our perspectives and to step out and live a little bit more creatively and originally.
Yeah. And I really, this concept of being in the fine zone really resonates with me because I feel like I have spent much of my life there as well.
Mm,
And for me, what I'm hearing from what you're saying about being in this fine zone is that yes, you have to now learn later in life to speak up and advocate for yourself, but the real damage for me was that I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know
mm,
what I like. I don't
mm,
know what my passions are because I have put other people ahead of me for so long, in addition to not listening to my own intuition and my own voice. And that combination has kind of left me in this strange place where I'm like, I don't know. Who am I? I don't
yeah,
know. Right? Am I
yeah,
fine? Am I not fine? I don't know. So I think it is about using your voice, but it's also about trusting your intuition and not losing that piece of who you are, even if you have to quiet it for a certain time in your life.
right, right. And I think that's a really powerful observation, Kristen. And, when I talk about the fine zone, so if you think of like happiness as a continuum, right, with, things are going great, they're rocking right along, I'm doing well in my relationships, well in my business, health wise, everything, super happy. Other side, miserable, right? That year that shall not be named for me was a miserable time. But if you think about it, if you are not entirely happy, does that mean that you're miserable? And if you're not entirely miserable, does that mean you're not happy? Or does that mean you're happy? And there's this vast area in between. And that's what I call the fine zone. And it's perfectly fine to feel fine. In fact, it's desirable to feel fine. But when we start getting to the point where we start asking those questions like, is this it? I mean, is this all there is? Shouldn't I be doing something more? Am I wasting my gifts? Shouldn't things be better now? Then you start moving closer to not so fine. And that's a warning sign. And those are the times that we have a choice. We can either push that little voice down and say, you know what, things are fine. They're good. I'm not going to rock the boat. Or we can do some self-reflection, make some decisions and do some little things a little bit differently to get ourselves out of fine and to what I call a real life extraordinary life, which I truly believe all of us are meant to lead.
Yeah. Why do you think fine is so dangerous, even though it feels safe? It feels comfortable. Why is it not a good thing for us?
Because it is comfortable, right? And we don't get to grow unless we stretch. We don't get to grow unless we stretch outside of fine, outside of our comfort zones. And I there's actually a biological theory that every living organism is either growing or dying. And if you're not growing, you're sliding. And we are not meant to be stagnant as human beings. We're meant to grow and evolve and into different versions of ourselves. You're not the person that you were 5 years ago, right? And you're certainly
Definitely
not the
not.
person you were, definitely not, right? Or even a year ago or a few months ago. And you won't be as fabulous as you are, Kristen. You and I won't be the same people a year from now that we are that we are now. So it's dangerous because it's alluring to stay in our comfort zones, but everything changes around us and we need to change with that. So, do we allow ourselves to be tossed about, or do we put our feet firmly down and make some decisions about how we do want to change?
Yeah. I really appreciate that too, because oftentimes we don't have a choice, right? Like for you, the year that shall not be named, right?
Yeah.
That forced you to change whether you wanted to or not. It just totally turned your world upside down. Um, can you walk us through what that period felt like while you were actually in it?
Yeah, yeah. And and you said something really important there too about not having a choice. And I felt that viscerally, right? I felt that viscerally for the first time in my life. I was spending weeks, in hospitals and months recovering, and I felt completely out of control. But what I learned is that no matter what is going around you, you always have a choice. You may not be able to choose the circumstances or the events, but you always have a choice about how you deal with it. And so there were days, I mean, I've always been, I don't know about you, Kristen, but I've always been a lifelong optimist. And I've spent 30 years in the field of adult learning and talent development. So helping busy people learn skills to thrive. And so I felt like I've got a pretty good toolkit. And I realized during that time that, well, this was going to demand a whole new level of me. And so what helped me, you asked what it was like. I figured, okay, I can fall into this why me pit. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? Right? I've done everything right. This isn't fair. And I let myself sit there for a little bit. And you know what? I didn't like it. I hated it. And so the other choice is, how can I move forward? How can I put one foot in front of the other, right foot, left foot? And I now have the incredible, breathtaking privilege of helping newly diagnosed chordoma patients. And I can just hear them spiraling about all of the things that need to happen and all of the potential scenarios. And my advice is always the same: right foot, left foot. So when you're going through a really difficult, heavy time where it feels like I can't do this, you don't have to do it all. You don't have to do it all at once, and you don't have to do it alone. Just put one foot in front of the other. And that was my mantra. I mean, I truly finally understood what people meant by one day at a time. Because if I could get out of bed, if I could stand at my standing desk for 10 minutes and answer an email before having to go back and lie on my side in my hospital bed in the middle of the living room, then if I could handle like a friend coming over and sitting with me for half an hour or an hour, that was that was all I needed to accomplish that day, right? Let my body heal, right foot, left foot. And that, I truly believe, is a great mantra for life, especially when things get really tough.
I love that. I really appreciate that because I mean, I'm, getting close to 180 episodes now, and I've talked to a lot of
Yeah, that's
guests,
great.
and
Yeah.
many people say similar things, that you have to start with a tiny thing every day
Mhm.
and just kind of relishing in that and being grateful for the small things you do have. So your friend came over and sat with you for 30 minutes and you were able to be present and tolerate that. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so great. And something that you've also mentioned in the past is like stepping into vulnerability. Even talking about things like this, like at one time felt like such a stretch. What made
Mm.
you kind of take that step anyway?
Mm. I I have become so much braver through this experience. And what I've learned is that you don't get stronger or braver by doing what you can. right? You get stronger, but by doing what you thought you couldn't. And I never thought, I mean, I never anticipated going through all of that in such a short period of time. And it's like, once you look back, now granted, it's easier when you're in the rearview mirror, right? Looking back at it. But once you do, again, you have that choice around what do you want to do with this? And I very early on realized, how can I use this to help others? How can I use this experience to help others? Because to your point, you mentioned gratitude. I had to get very clear on anything that brought me joy to get through the day, because there were some days that were this lifelong optimist did not want to get out of bed. And in fact, a couple years later, a friend of mine was going through her own year that shall not be named. And she asked me, she said, Susan, how did you get through that time? Because I feel like I'm completely overwhelmed. I'm taking drugs that I wish would work, but they're not, and I don't want to be taking them. And so how did you get through it? And I don't want you to just tell me to buck up or, focus on the positive. I want the playbook. I want the guide. And so I sat down and I started really clarifying, what did I do? What was my mindset? And that became a letter to my friend, and that became my first book, Decide Happy. And one of the key practices is gratitude, right? Finding, to your point, where we really build that mental muscle is the small things. And anybody can feel grateful when things are going well, but it's when things suck, right? And we can still find the things that we feel good about. That's when we build our gratitude muscle. And another one is control. I mean, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had no control over what was going on, but I realized, you know what? There are some things I can control. So even in an uncontrollable situation, we still get to control how we show up, how we make decisions, how we respond, how we react. And I see so many people, and I've been this person, I am this person, I work at this every day, where, there's construction going on outside of my place right now, and I can't sit out on my deck because there's dust and all this. Do I want to whine about it? Do I want to complain about it? Or do I want to just think, you know what? I'm really grateful. I've got this cool little place that I get to enjoy in Florida, during the winter, and not. So there's always things that we get to control, and we can take a different meaning from.
I so appreciate you said that, because we always have a choice. No matter what, even when things feels like we don't have a choice, we do. We do.
Yeah.
And part of that is your emotional reaction, but part of that is your physical action too, right?
Yeah.
You can cry about it. You can go to the gym. You can go for a walk with a friend. You can get some sunshine, get some ice cream, whatever you. There's always something. You can yell at the person, or you can show compassion. There's always ways that you can respond. And kind of in that vein, something you've talked about is closing the gap between where we are and where we want to be. And I think it's very common for people to get stuck there, right? Because it's like we just want to complain about what we don't have or what we wish we had, and it's hard to kind of get past that. Why do you think so many people stay stuck there?
Yeah, because it's fun to complain, right? It's fun to complain. It's a lot more fun to complain, and it's a lot easier to blame the situation or other people than to do the hard work, right? Do the hard work of deciding, taking action, and keep working at it, to own that okay, this situation stinks. What am I going to do about it?
Yeah,
Um, I think that's why.
that
And
makes
believe
total
me,
sense.
I have done my share of crying, and I have done my share of complaining. So I don't want you to think I'm perfect at this, but I know that when I use these skills and tools that I teach other people, it works, right? And in the process, we become so much stronger and resilient. And it's not always easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that, at least in myself, overthinking is a huge
Mm,
part of that for me too. It's almost like analysis paralysis, where I'm like, well, I could do
hmm
this or this, but this is good, but this is bad. Which one is slightly better, even though they're both fine options? They're both good options. And it's hard to get out of that for me, because I can really stay stuck in doing research forever and never really making a choice and moving forward. Now, your work focuses on helping people take fast action instead of getting stuck in their heads. What's one way people can interrupt that cycle?
Yeah, yeah. Great question. By the way, your brain is working against you in that case, Kristen. And I'm an overthinker too. I'm a recovering overthinker. But there's a biological reason for that. There's this little part of your brain, it's about the size of a shelled peanut, called the amygdala, which is responsible for fight, flight, and freeze, those reactions. And
Mhm.
your amygdala keeps you alive when you're driving 65 miles an hour and somebody cuts you off and you swerve to avoid, right? It shoots you all kinds of dopamine and adrenaline to get you to react, right? To keep you alive. The problem is your brain, because that part is designed to keep you alive, it's always looking for risk, it's always looking for problems. Well, if I do this, am I going to fail? What are other people going to think? What if I screw up? What if it hurts? What if it's uncomfortable? So it's always asking those questions. So we have to actually move our thoughts from that kind of react part of our brain to the prefrontal cortex. This is as much science as I'm going to share, to focus from reacting to rationing. So one of the first things you can do when you're freaking out about something or feeling overwhelmed or overthinking is just to name it. In fact, psychologists call this name it to tame it. I feel anxious right now. I feel uncomfortable right now. I feel fearful right now. And immediately that begins to move your thoughts into rational thinking. And then you can start thinking, okay, um, what is it that I'm hoping to accomplish? And what's the downside of doing this, or what's the upside of doing this? But don't spend too long with that. And you mentioned fast action. The way that I define, I truly believe that action keeps us moving forward, right foot, left foot. And it doesn't always have to be something big and hairy and audacious. It could be sending an email, it could be making a phone call, it could be signing up for a class. But action is what gets us out of the find zone into our more extraordinary life. And the way that I define fast action is make it fast, make it doable, and don't overthink it. Because if we overthink it, we're going to give ourselves time to talk ourselves out of it. We're going to procrastinate. So, as quickly as you can, take a fast action, fast, doable, don't overthink it. That's what begins to move us forward in our lives. I could talk about that all day, so I want to be careful, Kristen, that I'm answering your questions.
No, I think that's really wise. That those three things, that fast, doable, and don't overthink it. Because you're right. It's like you can talk yourself into it or out of it, and if you stay there forever, that's not helpful for anybody. And I would argue that probably goes in your category of dying versus growing. So,
Yeah.
really good tip there. And Susan, as we're winding down a little bit today, we've got one last question, and I want to bring this back to your core message, which is that you already have everything you need right now. For someone listening who doesn't believe that yet, what would you say directly to them?
So I want your listeners to know that you have your own journey, you have your own life and your own experiences that make you magic. and unique and extraordinary. And you have learned things. You have been through pain. You have lessons etched upon your heart and your soul that can contribute and help another human being. And so no one in the history of time has your exact series of decisions and your biology in this period of time. So you truly are already extraordinary. You're born that way. But what happens is somewhere along the way, we forget that and we dim our light. And just like I was, the good girl trying to fit in, trying to conform, but we aren't made to conform. We're made to be extraordinary. So, my wish for you is to stay strong and be brave and take those fast actions, right foot, left foot, and stay kind. I truly believe that. I mean, my adrenaline was going before our meeting today, Kristen, before our podcast. As many of these as I do, I hope that adrenaline will never stops. I feel like if I am super excited about something and a little scared, we're doing it right because
Mhm.
that's the only way, A, we get to grow, and B, we get to shine our light on others. And that we all need that right now.
That is amazing. And thank you, Susan, for sharing all that. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to share your website too.
Sure, sure. Well, I would love to invite your listeners and viewers to decidehappy.com, where I write just a little bit of happy in your inbox once or twice a month. I know every marketing person says I should be doing a lot more, but I write I write old fashioned and I put a lot of time into it. You can also learn about my books, my speaking engagements, my workshops. So decidehappy.com.
Amazing. Susan, this has been such a powerful conversation. Thank you. Your story truly is a reminder that life can change in an instant, and waiting until we
Yeah.
feel ready, confident, or certain is just another way of staying stuck. So,
Yeah.
thank you. You've given us something so tangible here, not just inspiration, but really a way forward. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your story today.
Great. Kristen, and thank you for what you do and the light that you're putting out into the world right now. You're making a difference.
Thank you, Susan.